addressing the professor, I think the panel had some great suggestions. Mostly she said, call your professor doctor or professor, and that's a good way to start. It may be tempting to call them by their first names because it's so casual, but it's always, I think it's always a good approach to start off by with the most respectful salutation in any place, I think in the United States or in the world, actually. So in our environment, doctor or professor would be the most appropriate initial way to address a faculty member, and then you can look for cues. Usually they will tell you if they prefer to be called by their first name or to be called professor first name and things like that. But to start off, unless you're told, it's best to call them professor or doctor, their last name. In the university, there's a little bit of a distinction between professor and doctor. Professor is usually someone who's become a full professor here over the years. But so the more general term is doctor. But in general, if you call them either professor or doctor, that would be a good way to start. Office hours, as our panel also mentioned, are a great way to talk to your professors, your faculty member. It's not a great time for you to be asking or negotiating intently for a better grade, but it's a great way to tap into the knowledge of your professors. We have professors here who come from the top universities in the world, and if you're not talking to them and getting to know them in their offices, you're not benefiting from one of the best things that you could have here, right? Just being in the classroom, that's very beneficial. But if you can come and talk and ask really good questions about your industry, your career, your field, and come to your professors' offices, you're going to get really top-notch answers because they've been in some of the best places in the world, both in industry and in academia, for that kind of research and that field and in that industry. So make the most of it. Go and visit your professors during office hours. They are not super busy during office hours generally. So it is a good idea to come and visit them, get to know them. It's also the case that they always get requests from industry and from their colleagues in different universities for students that they can recommend for jobs, for positions. And so you want to make sure you're right there up front in the top of their list, and you won't get there without really getting to know them and talking to them. You can impress them in the classroom, but adding that additional personal relationship and substantial conversation really moves you up the top when they're trying to think of who is exceptional and who they should recommend for these types of requests. Working with your peers, we also got some great tips from our students. It's really important to know what your strengths are and to know that others in your team have other strengths and to respect that and to work together to provide a better project for your class. But the thing I think I would add is to think about your own performance as well. It's true that many of our students work in the top companies in the local area, right? So this is, you have to see your teams in classes as a chance to network. You know, during downturns, which is not right now, but during downturns, but in general, the easiest way to get your first position is through your network. And you don't want to let down someone who works in one of the firms that you want to join after you graduate or go for your practical training, because they are your best recommenders as far as the different organizations that they're in. Usually employees in a company hear first about opportunities, and so you want to make sure that anyone that you work with while you're here is impressed and is willing to recommend you. So one of the most important things you need to do then is make sure you deliver when you are part of a team. Okay, and see each of your team members as someone potentially who's part of your network and will be, a way to actually start your career or kickstart it. So student life, we already talked about that. And being active in student organizations, not only say in cultural clubs, which are also very, very important to your life here, and sports clubs, but also look for a club that actually focuses in your area of study, in your discipline, in your industry, because then that club is a way for you to exhibit leadership. As a member, you can go to the events and network and see industry folks, because they will always come here and talk about their industries and the opportunities and how you become part of their industry. But it's also, to put it at the next level, you will want to become an officer in that club and start showing your leadership with organizing events, with establishing relationships with people in the industry. So consider that as something to do while you are in your programs here. In classroom, be prepared. Study before you come to class seems to be a given, but it's easy to forget that when you're in a new environment. Be punctual. Try to avoid using your personal devices while you are in the class, even if you feel you can multitask. It's always best to pay attention to what the professor is doing. And then participate. As your panel has said here, ask questions. And yes, it's definitely a way to impress your professors, again, to make sure you build that relationship. But also, I found that if you're feeling bored in a classroom, the best way to not do that, to get over that, is to actually participate and ask questions, and make the conversation something that is meaningful to you. And you can do that by asking questions politely. Also, if you think the professor made a mistake, you may point it out respectfully in the class, or you might want to wait until after the class is over and just talk to them. And they can always come back the next time and talk about it. One thing to keep in mind is if you miss a class, if you have a great network, you can ask your classmates what happened in the class. But one thing that would be good to avoid is to ask your professor if anything important happened in the class that day. And I think it's obvious why. But surprisingly, a lot of students ask that. Okay, so being in Silicon Valley is quite special. As you know, it's a center of innovation, a lot of growth, a lot of creativity, and that makes it quite a different place, unique from many other places in the world. I think a lot of people here feel or are more accepting of mistakes. It's a much more casual area. So you can feel a little bit more that you can take risks here, right? But make sure you don't just go and come up with your creative idea and just push it. You might be able to actually get traction on it, but it's much better if you can back it up with data or with your prototype that you build in your project here. So take those risks. It's the place to do it, but make sure that you can back it up with data, your great prototype, or you're savvy, of course. But don't just try to sell an idea without all the backup. And you can get some great practice while you're here. I know many of you will be working on projects. The College of Business, and actually across the university, we have several events that are focused on entrepreneurship. So this fall, we have the Silicon Valley Innovation Challenge, which you will be hearing about. And it's a place to actually post your ideas and get it in front of investors early on. So that's the fall one, is when you have this germ of an idea, maybe a small prototype. So I encourage you all to take part in that. You're early on, it's your first semester. As you know, in the Valley, many times it's a multiple entrepreneur, even if it was multiple failures. They get a lot of respect because they learn from each and every one of those failures. So you could do your own little bit of that. First semester, go ahead and try it out. You might win, but if you don't, you're still going to learn a lot from that. And you'll be here another year. You can submit your improved idea the next year. in the spring, there's also a business plan competition. So you can evolve your idea throughout the year and get it into these competitions and get both feedback from some very successful entrepreneurs who are angel funders as well. So if they like your idea, they may just fund it offline because they see it. You need to get your idea out there to get it, get investment into it. But also there are prizes in each of these competitions that can help you push your idea to the next level. Okay, so I encourage you to pay attention to those announcements and push yourself. This is the place to do it. Go and explore the US culture. Networking, I think many of you raised your hand when I asked about Facebook for your different areas. So that's great. You're already starting to plug into the community. It's a very well-developed community because we hire a lot of students from across campus, and I know that many of them use this as a great resource for introducing themselves into life here in the United States. Try to explore things that you haven't done before. Try out the restaurants in the area and see what's different, but also sort of celebrate that difference. Don't go with your first impression because there's a lot that's new here, both what's in California, but also all the different cultures that are in the same area. Immigration issues are pretty complex and very specialized. So you could go to your friends, you could go to your advisor in your department, you could even go to your associate dean, but they may not actually know everything that applies for your situation. So for the best information on your immigration issues, you still should go to the International Programs and Scholars Group. They have advisors, they know the law, they know all your options, and I highly suggest that you come to them with your questions and just find out from them what the different options are as you're here for your 2 years in your program, and then your internship and your OPT after that. Okay, so, or maybe your job after your school, you graduate from here. So that is my quick and dirty set of tips for what to do in your first few years here and how you might adjust. I'm happy to take any questions you might have at this time.